bienvenue au podcast de lutte en deux chaises de métal, le podcast de lutte animé par moi-même Marco et l'encyclopédie de la lutte au Québec, TJ Holiday.
Incroyable.
Unbelievable.
Unbelievable, bro.
Bro, aujourd'hui, au podcast, nous avons eu le privilège, mais c'est bizarre comment je vois l'entrevue d'aujourd'hui, mais je suis content parce que c'est quelque chose. On rentre dans une partie de la lutte qu'on a vécue étant jeune, surtout, là. Mais on reçoit quelqu'un qui était direct dans les. Comment on pourrait dire ça?
Dans les sphères.
Dans les sphères, direct dans l'action, direct dedans, pendant que nous autres, on tripait à la maison. Évidemment, on parle du writer de la WWF à l'époque, nul autre que Vince Russo, bro.
C'est malade. Pour vrai, je capote.
Tu sais, puis je sais pas, c'est juste unreal. C'est pas genre, on a une méga star.
C'est pas le Hogan ou The Rock, mettons. Là,
mais tu sais, c'est juste fucké d'avoir ce genre d'invité au podcast. C'est juste le fun, tu sais. Oui, il est controversé. Oui, on n'est pas d'accord avec tout ce qu'il dit. Oui, je pourrais le contredire sur la moitié de ce qu'il va dire, mais je sais pas, man. Le gars, c'est quand même Vince Russo, puis il a travaillé pour la WWF avec Vince McMahon, ces affaires-là. Tu sais, dans le meilleur des temps, puis dans le Monday Night War aussi. Là.
Ouais, pour vrai, dans l'Attitude Era, le classic stuff, là, dans le temps de la Monday Night War, puis tout, là, c'est vraiment, c'est big. Puis, c'est vraiment le fun. En plus, au début de l'entrevue, on va dire, il me roast un petit peu au début, là.
Ouais, évidemment, c'est un heel, hein. Fait que...
Ouais, c'est correct, mais c'est une bonne guerre, c'est correct. Mais avant ça...
Ouais. Évidemment, allez voir à travers la table nos entrevues avec les artisans québécois et la lutte moderne, chose que Vince Russo déteste aujourd'hui. Donc, pour lui, c'est juste une job, bro. Mais allez voir ça. Donc, on parle de ça dans à travers la table le mardi 20h30, live sur Facebook, Twitch et YouTube. Et évidemment, dernier podcast qu'on a fait, ben, c'est Fully Loaded 1998, le In Your House, avec entre autres Triple H en action. Donc, allez voir ça, un main event. C'était pas le main event, hein, Triple H Rock, c'était le match
Austin, Austin Taker et Mankind Kane.
Ouais, exact. Donc, allez voir ça, c'est notre review de cette semaine. Et évidemment, de la semaine passée, évidemment, cette semaine, on l'a dit. Vous le connaissez pour plusieurs aspects de son travail, TJ. Tu peux nommer quelques-uns de ses accomplissements.
Ben oui, évidemment, Vince Russo, qui a été booker à WWF, à TNA, WCW. Aussi, évidemment, il a été écrivain pour le WWF Magazine, le Raw Magazine aussi, qui ont sorti. C'est évidemment champion du monde à WCW. Le gars qui a fait que David Arquette est champion du monde à WCW, c'est lui. Toutes sortes d'affaires. Pour vrai, quitte que ce qu'il a fait dans le monde de la lutte, là, ça prendrait quasiment une journée complète juste tout dire qu'est-ce qu'il a fait. Là.
Ouais. Évidemment, j'allais dire David Arquette, on a une personne qui était d'accord vraiment là-dessus, mais il nous explique le pourquoi ça a été fait. Puis, tu sais, c'est pas nécessairement est-ce que je l'aurais fait à sa place, peut-être pas, mais je comprends pourquoi ils l'ont fait.
Ouais, fait que c'est ça. Fait que, il parle de ça, il parle de beaucoup de sujets là, pour vrai, vous allez voir. Ouais. On a passé pratiquement 1 heure avec lui, puis on a eu bien du fun à parler de beaucoup de sujets. Fait que, évidemment, Vince Russo, écrivain, toute l'équipe. Fait que dans quelques instants, mais maintenant pas quelques instants. Là, on vous présente l'entrevue avec Vince Russo qu'on a fait il y a quelques semaines. Donc, enjoy tout le monde, puis on se voit après pour la fin du podcast.
Let's do it, bro.
Okay, bro. Thank you so much, Mr. Vince Russo, being on the podcast with us today. How are you going?
I'm doing all right, TJ. Let's tell a little bit of the backstory, though, TJ. All right, let's tell a little bit of the backstory. I don't do hardly any interviews ever. And I'll be honest with you, bro. When people ask me to do an interview, I basically tell them, oh, okay, bro, it's $150 for an hour because I know they'll go away if I tell them that. Mm-hmm. Okay? So you wanted to do this interview with me, and you seem like a really nice guy. So I said, you know what? I'll do it. I'll do it for $100 for you. I'll do it for $100, right?
I know what's coming. I don't like it.
Then I get an email from TJ. Get this, people listening to this show. Can we pay you half up front and half after the interview? Because we've been burned before. So TJ actually thought I was going to rip him off of $100. TJ, did it ever occur to you that if I ripped you off of $100 and you let people know that, as much as people can't stand me, do you understand what a field day they would have had that Vince Russo ripped off this poor podcast from Canada, bro? Seriously, bro. Seriously.
Yeah. Now you say it like that, I think you're right.
Okay. All right. But I'm here, bro. Listen, you never got to worry about me, bro. When I tell you I'm going to be here and I'm going to do your show, you never, ever have to worry about me, bro.
Awesome.
And I'm happy for once. TJ's the bad guy. So
yes, Marco. Yeah. You said it, Marco. I didn't.
He said I was a nice guy before he said anything too.
Yeah.
Shut up. Shut up and let's go. Let's go for the
where are you guys from in Canada? Where are you guys from?
From Montreal.
Montreal, man. I swear, I'm a mark for Canada, bro. I love Canada. I loved every time I went there, and I've always been a mark for the Canadian accent, bro. And the one word that always gets me is out. I used to remember Angelina Love.
Yep.
Yeah.
Every time she used to give me the out. Oh my God, she used to pop me every single time. Every single time. But yeah, I do love your country. I loved every time I went there, bro. It's awesome. So I am all yours, TJ and Marco, whatever you'd like to discuss.
Perfect.
Let's go.
So what are you up to these days, Mr. Russo?
Well, bro, thank God, man. I've been podcasting now for over 10 years, bro. Well over 10 years. And I love it. And it's great. And it's right up my alley, bro, because I used to do radio like back in 1990. And I really, really, really loved radio. And I always wanted to get into radio. But obviously, podcasting is the next best thing. So I've been doing Russo's brand now for, God, well over a decade, man, and I wouldn't trade it in for anything else.
Perfect.
Yeah, perfect. That's great.
Yeah. Before we start with your WWF history and your wrestling history in general, can you talk to us about the early years of Vince Russo, what you did before professional wrestling?
Yeah, I grew up in Long Island, New York, bro. Just a normal childhood. Was a normal kid. I kind of fell in love with writing somewhere like around the 7th grade or so. And then, I decided to go to college, get my degree in journalism, which I did. For a couple of years, I owned a couple of stores in the video business when it was just starting. They were small mom and pop stores. I did that for a while. Then, of course, the story of me writing to Linda McMahon, who kind of got my foot in the door as a freelance writer for the WWF magazine. And from there, I got the job as the editor of the magazine, and the rest is really history, man. And I kind of been, dabbling in wrestling since like 1991.
Insane.
How come the first contact with Linda McMahon?
Because I knew I was doing a radio show and I was funding the radio show myself, Marco, and I was running out of money. So I knew I'm not going to write a letter to Vince McMahon. Vince McMahon must get 1 million letters. I'm going to write to Linda. I knew Linda worked there. And, bro, I had no idea Linda was in charge of publications. Like, I had no idea. And, sure enough, I wrote her a letter. I told her about myself. I told her about my background and my degree and everything. And Linda called. And, she hooked me up with the editor of the magazine at the time. And that's how I started freelancing for the magazine.
Wow.
Why did you choose the name Vic Venom?
Bro, I'll be honest with you, TJ. I was writing like 90% of that magazine. So like not everything could be by Vince Russo, by Vince Russo, by Vince Russo, by Vince Russo. So I literally had to come up with different names so people actually thought there were a lot of people working on the magazine. And Vic Venom was one of those names that I came up with.
Okay.
And go ahead, TJ.
Yeah. You worked for the magazine for what, 3 years, 4 years?
Bro, I always worked for the magazine. Even when I was writing television, I was still involved with the magazine. I never really left the magazine. I was always involved with the magazine. That was like my baby. You know what I mean? I mean, I loved writing for that magazine. I took great pride in writing for that magazine. So even when I transitioned over to television, I was still involved with the magazine.
What would you say your favorite articles that you wrote for the WWF magazine and Raw magazine, of course?
Well, bro, probably like, the Vic Venom, because it's so funny, bro, because, those Vic Venom articles were how I really felt. But I always knew that if anybody had an issue with it, I could just say, I'm playing a character. What are you guys, marks? I'm being a character. I'm being a heel character. Meanwhile, I was able to kind of hide behind the veil of Vic Venom and say how I really felt about certain things at the time.
Perfect. Okay. And for the transition to television, it was 1996, I think.
Yeah, it was around 96, I think it was. I think, yeah, right around then, yeah.
And how it works creatively in the back with Vince McMahon, with all the writer, with you.
I mean, how did the system work?
How it works.
Like a day of doing
like a day in a creative team.
Yeah, I could tell you guys, I don't know how it works today, but it's nothing to how it worked back then. I mean, for a very long time, bro, it was just Vince and I. That's it. Just the two of us. And then when Vince really started getting really busy, when the business started taking off, that's when Ed Ferrara came in. And me and Ed would write the entire show. We would present it to Vince. Vince would have his tweaks here and his tweaks there. Then we would go back. We would, add all, the comments that Vince had. Then I would go back to him one more time and show him the final script. And that was it, man. There wasn't 20, 25 people involved. There wasn't a Raw team and a SmackDown team. It was really, really, really that simple. And somehow they've just managed to make the process so much more complicated than it should be today.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah. What is the best and the worst storyline you ever made?
The best, I would say, is probably Rock joining the corporation. I think that was a really, really good storyline. The worst, I will always say, was that dog kennel from hell match, man, because I was expecting to get like rabid canine dogs, foaming at the mouth, and we wound up getting people's pets. And it was absolutely atrocious. Absolutely atrocious.
Is Vince McMahon was on board for the corporate Rock right away? Or
absolutely. I got to be honest with you guys, man. Vince let me write the television. I mean, he really did. Once Vince saw that we were getting ratings and it was working, he kind of just let me write it. I mean, he gave me the freedom to write the show and write for him and write his promos. And I never, man, had an issue, with Vince once. So I can even remember, man, one time we really disagreed and I got really hot. And I remember it was going into that SummerSlam, the Highway to Hell. And because Taker and Austin were friends, they wanted to have a babyface match. And I was telling Vince, bro, this is Madison Square Garden. They don't want to see a babyface match, man. They want to see these guys kill each other. And I remember getting into a heated argument with him about it. But, that's what Austin and Taker wanted. And Vince really wanted to make them happy. Bro, I swear to God, that is like one of the very, very few times that the two of us disagreed on something, man. I would literally write it and, Vince would, just kind of go with the flow and go with it, man. We never ever clashed, man.
And you talk about the Garden. We saw yesterday Punk versus Rollins. They blew Rollins out of the building at the Garden.
Yeah, I think that was I think that was a horrible show last night, bro. I've been watching Garden shows since the early 70s, And I remember how those garden shows used to be. And watching that show last night, I'm sorry, man. That's my opinion. Some people may think it's a great show and they love the show. I thought for Madison Square Garden last night, that was a horrible show.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. And something I've been dying to ask you since you're on the podcast with us today. One of the shows we did a review not long ago was Survivor Series 1998, Deadly Games. One of, if not one of the greatest nights of storytelling just for one show. Can you take us through the show I was, how the storyline was booked and everything?
God, bro, give me a little background on that. I could have sworn I just did a show about that. Give me a little background about that. Was there some
big
kind
tournament.
of tournament or something? Yeah, there was a tournament, right? Is that when Rock joined the corporation?
Exactly.
Yeah. No, bro. The beauty. Here's why you'll never see a story like that again, because we dropped hints about Rock turning heel like for months. For months, we knew what we were going to do. That was a story, bro, that we really put a lot of time and effort and thought into. You're not going to see that anymore. The WWE has to come up with so many hours of programming every week. They don't have time for good stories anymore. And I swear to God, I can remember the week before the Monday Night Raw before Deadly Games. I swear to God, I can remember we wrote a scene where Rock was going to drop the people's elbow on Vince to throw off the people. And I'll never forget, me and Ed were writing, and I'm like, oh man, Ed, really? Like, can Rock really drop the people's elbow on Vince? And bro, Ed Ferrara looked at me and said to me, Vince, it's an elbow. But it just goes to show you what that move meant back then. It was a freaking elbow. That's all it was. And Rock made you actually believe that when he dropped it on somebody, he was killing them. You fast forward today to 2025, what these wrestlers got to do for a freaking pop, how they've got to kill themselves and the ridiculousness, when back then everybody believed in a freaking elbow, bro. That's how much times have changed.
Yeah. Yep. And for the bad sometime.
Yeah.
Back in the day,
TJ, why does Marco have such a heavy Canadian accent, but you're not as heavy as Marco? Because Marco, you know who you reminded me of? You reminded me so much of somebody I used to love so much. Pat Patterson. You got that. You got that Pat Patterson accent going. Now, TJ, how come your accent isn't as heavy as Marco's?
I have no idea. I can tell you, but I know my English is a bit better because I've been practicing a little bit more when I was at school and everything.
Yeah.
So that maybe that's why I come off like that. But usually he's all right.
Yeah, Mark reminded me so much of Pat, and I loved Pat, man. I absolutely adored Pat Patterson.
A legend, great legend, Pat Patterson.
Yeah.
What mid-card talent back in the day you want to push to the moon, but you can't? Is there any talent in mid-card talent where you want to push to the moon, but you can't at the time?
Bro, I did everything I wanted to do. I really did. I mean, bro, people don't believe me, and I don't care if they don't believe me. They weren't there. Vince McMahon never told me no. He never said no. He let me write the show. And, one of the goals I always had was, I wanted to get everybody on that roster over, bro. I didn't care who you were. My job was to try to get everybody on that roster over. So I gave my best effort with all talent, bro. It really didn't matter who you were.
Did any talent you prouder to push to push back in the day?
Wait, did any talent what now?
You're proud of pushing any talent back in the day, like a Goldust or New Age Outlaws or something like that?
Yeah, bro, I'll tell you what I'm proud of, man. I'm proud of that everybody had a role. Everybody had a role. Everybody felt involved. Everybody felt like they were part of it. I'm proud of that. I mean, I see talent on the WWE roster today that they don't even use. You never see them. And I'm like, how... if you can't come up with creative for the Wyatt Six, why are you working for that company? You should be fired. If you can't come up with creative for a talent, if you can't come up with creative for Karrion Kross, you need to be fired. That is your job as a writer and a producer. And if you've got people on the roster that are underutilized or not being used, it is your fault. It is not their fault.
Yeah. And we talked about before a little bit about Survivor Series 1998, which was Deadly Games. Now we go back 1 year to our place is famous for, Montreal Screwjob. Can you take us through how the meeting was the day before or just before the show, and how do you end up doing the Screwjob in the end?
Yeah, bro, it was I hate that day. I regret that day. I wish that day never happened. It was not fun for anybody. You're not going to find a bigger Bret Hart fan than me. But the bottom line was Bret was going to WCW. Vince needed to get the title off Bret because Vince was afraid that Bret was going to bring the belt to WCW. That's what that whole thing was about. And I'll never forget, man, the week before the Survivor Series, I went to Vince's house. And at that time, it was me, Vince, and Cornette writing the TV. And Vince pulled me aside in another room and he said, Vince, I'm going to have a phone conversation with Bret today. And I want you to be on the phone because I want a witness. So I witnessed the conversation. Bret did not know I was on the call. I listened to the conversation and Vince pitched so many ideas to Bret and Bret poo-pooed every single one of them. So, it was getting late at night. We had been at Vince's house all day. And man, bro, I had 3 kids at the time. I just wanted to go home. So literally, man, out of frustration, I said to Vince, screw it. Have Sean put Bret in the sharpshooter and have the referee call for the bell. Bro, I said that because I wanted to go home. Like literally, I wanted to go home. So, bro, after that, I had very, very little contact with Vince McMahon prior to the Survivor Series. I don't think I had any contact with him the day of. And then, I'm watching the match on the monitor and I'm sitting next to Taker. And then I saw that exact finish and I was like, oh my God, like I couldn't believe it. But it's almost like Vince kept me so far away from it, like to try to protect me. Like, he wanted this is all on me. I'm the owner of this company. This is all on me. So I had no idea they were going to do that. I was not privy to anything the day of. Nothing. So when I saw that, man, I was probably as surprised as anybody else. And bro, a couple of days later, I was on a phone call with Bret, and he was hot. And I just said to him, man, I said, Bret, you're never going to look at it this way, but I got to be honest with you. I agree with Vince. Vince was just trying to protect his company. It was nothing personal. Vince loved you, but Vince was afraid that Bischoff was going to talk you into dropping that belt on the show, and that would have been a total embarrassment to the entire company. And I mean, I told Bret that directly. And bro, I still feel that way to this day. He did what he had to do, and it sucked, bro. It absolutely sucked. I hate that ever even happened.
And were you backstage when when Bret punched Vince and everything like that? Were you backstage witnessing it?
Well, I didn't. I mean, obviously, I was backstage, but I did not witness that. I did not see that with my own eyes. No.
What was your reaction when you heard about it?
I was not surprised, bro, because that's how Vince is. Like, Vince knew he had a receipt. He did something he didn't want to do. At the end of the day, he screwed one of the boys, and that's a cardinal sin. And Vince walked into that dressing room knowing full well that he was owed a receipt. And that's why that went down. I mean, so I was not surprised about that at all.
Mm-hmm.
You talk about Pat Patterson before. What is your best story with Pat Patterson?
Oh, man, for me, bro, just working with him and Briscoe as the Stooges was just so much fun, man. Those guys were just so freaking funny. And I just love that we were able to give them a role on camera. And, you know, they were able to like extend their career a little bit. They were so entertaining, man. Both of them were so great.
Remember that match against Mean Street Posse, the 3-on-2 match? That was one of the matches that had the most ratings for like that year, I think, or something.
Yeah, I even believe, bro, that match, I believe the same night on Nitro, it was Savage against Hogan. And that match blew Savage and Hogan out of the water. That tells you everything you need to know about Jerry and Pat.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's so good, yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
You got anything, Mark?
No, go ahead, TJ.
Yeah. So after that, in the end, you left WWF at the end of 1999, if I'm not mistaken. What led to your departure, and do you have any regrets leaving?
What led to my departure was Vince had just added SmackDown. He didn't let me and Ed know about it. So he was doubling our workload. So we were working 24/7 now. And I basically wanted to move my family closer to my wife's family because my wife was raising 3 kids on her own. So I went into Vince's office and I said, listen, man, I want to move my family. If that means I only go see them on weekends, you know, whatever. My wife needs help, you know. And Vince looked me in the eye and he said to me, he goes, Vince, I don't know what the problem is. You're making enough money now. Why don't you hire a nanny to watch your kids? It was over, bro. It was over. When those words came out of his mouth and he showed me how little he cared about me and my family and my wife and my kids, I could not work another day for that man. I left that office and I directly went to somebody that I knew JJ Dillon well. And I was on the phone with WCW that day.
So that was your plan. As soon as you said, I'm leaving WWF, you went to WCW.
I was never going to work for him again. I was never going to. And do I regret it? Absolutely not. I would do the same thing tomorrow, man. You're going to tell a man that you could give 2 shits about his family and I'm supposed to still work for that guy? I don't regret that for 1 second.
After everything you did for him too as well,
Yeah.
Do you remember the first day of WCW, the first story you wrote at WCW? Anything you can tell us?
I can just really remember, Marco, like my first day like at a TV taping. It was a different world than WWE. Now, you got to understand, man, I wasn't naive and I wasn't stupid. I knew there were politics. There's politics in wrestling, no matter who you work for. I never knew, though, the politics were at the level that they were at WCW. I mean, bro, you had the top guys dressing together. Then you had the mid-card guys all the way on a different side of the building. The locker room was clearly split. None of the veterans like really trusted me because they were afraid I was going to give the younger guys the push. It was so freaking political, man. And like I said, I knew it was going to be political. I just could have never imagined it was going to be at that level.
Wow. Okay.
And when you started at WCW as an on-screen talent, you weren't on the screen personally. You were like, that like point of view to see, you were watching other people. How come did it change for you from doing this to actually being a guy in the ring doing storylines after?
Yeah, and I regret. I regret being an on-air character for a couple of reasons. Number one, I did not enjoy it. I really did not enjoy it because to me, it was a lot of pressure because no matter who I worked with, I just didn't want to make them look bad. That's all I cared about. I didn't care about myself. When I was in there with Ric Flair, I did not want to make Ric Flair look bad. So I never enjoyed being an on-air character. And number two, it really took away from my job as a writer and a producer. You know, I was trying to do both things during the show, and it was way too much. And the reason why I made that decision, guys, and I regret it, was they were putting so much pressure on me to get ratings overnight that I finally just said to myself, you know what, bro? You want me to get ratings? I'll go out there. I'll freaking do it myself. I'll make everybody hates New Yorkers. I'll go out there. I'll play a New Yorker 10 times over the top. People will hate me as a heel. And that's why I did it. But I never enjoyed it. And that's why I never later on, like I was an on-air character early on at TNA to help Jeff out because we had so many young kids at TNA. But, you know, when I went back to TNA, I was never an on-screen character again because I'd rather work behind the scenes.
Okay.
Before we go back to WWF, I have a question. Why David Arquette as world champion?
Yeah, I mean, bro, it's freaking business. We needed a publicity stunt. It's that simple, bro. We needed they were kicking our ass thanks to me and Ed. They were kicking our ass, and we needed a publicity stunt. And you know, Tony Schiavone actually pitched that to me. And I wasn't even thinking about that. And I remember saying to Tony, my God, Tony, if that didn't even cross my mind, nobody will believe that. And bro, you know, again, I will say this till the day I die. Bro, the next morning we're on the cover of USA Today. It was meant to be a publicity stunt, and it served that purpose. I don't regret it. I do the same exact thing again today. Okay.
Because he's good at movie, but as world champion, but I understand.
But bro, that's the whole idea, man. If you look at the story and what happened, bro, first of all, he didn't beat a wrestler. He beat Eric Bischoff. And then the story was he didn't want anything to do with the belt. I mean, he knew I'm not a wrestler. I can't. That was the story, bro. The fact that you had a Hollywood actor slip on a freaking banana peel, all of a sudden he's got this title that he wants nothing to do with. I mean, that was the story. And bro, I will say it to this day. I would rather attempt the story that has never been done before than repeat the same old shit over and over and over again. And that's what they do in the WWE now. It's the same old shit. Last night, Chad Gable now is Owen Hart is the Blue Blazer. I'm not him. That's not me. Like, give me a break, bro. All they do is repeat the same stuff over and over. I was constantly trying to come up with new looks that wrestling fans never saw before.
Yeah. Talk about Owen Hart. Do you have any stories of pranks of the good old Owen Hart? My favorite wrestler of all time.
Yeah, I loved Owen, bro, and everybody loved Owen. But, you know, bro, the boys, like, never pranked The Office. I mean, The Office was kind of off limits. They always pranked each other. My favorite freaking Owen story is, though, bro, we were having a pay-per-view, and at the time, Owen was off of television. It was right around the Brett stuff. So after the Montreal Screwjob, we were keeping Owen off of television for a while, and then we were going to bring him back. And my greatest Owen story is we're at a pay-per-view and a fight goes backstage. And I don't remember who the wrestlers were, bro, but they fight into this back room, and there's freaking Owen Hart, who's not supposed to be anywhere in sight. Without missing a beat, Owen looked directly in the camera and said, I'm not here, and took off. Bro, I will never forget that as long as I live. But God, bro, Owen was the absolute best, man. The absolute best.
Yeah.
He should be world heavyweight champion, no?
Owen?
Yeah.
I don't know. There was never any discussion of that, bro. You didn't need to put a belt on Owen.
No,
like
that's
you know,
true.
Owen was just so over and so loved and so entertaining. You know, you usually put a belt on somebody to help them, you know, really get to that next level. Oh, Owen, in my opinion, didn't need a belt.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep.
Fair enough.
And of course, everybody knows the beef that the backstage between Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels at the time. It was like going at each other's throat each and every week backstage and on TV. Sometimes, most of the time, it was on TV too. But one war I want to talk about is Sunny versus Sable. You have any stories about them not liking each other?
Bro, none of those girls liked each other. Bro, I swear, you know, Sunny hated Sable. Sable hated Sunny. Bro, Luna hated Sable. And that was dangerous because Luna was old school. And this is when you're kind of getting into the divas now, these beautiful women that you're teaching them to wrestle, but they didn't pay dues or anything like that. And like Luna just hated Sable. Bro, I remember once breaking up a fight between Luna and Sunny. You know, me of all people breaking up a fight because that's when, you know, you had the old school, you had the Jackies, you had the, you had the Lunas, and you had these now divas that were starting to get all the attention, and the old guard, you know, did not like that. So the women in that locker room did not get along well.
Mm-hmm. Did you have a preference over Sunny or Sable yourself, or?
I was definitely a Sable guy. Like,
okay,
yeah, but not on a personal level. Just on my, you know, my cup of tea. For me, Sable was a lot easier to work with than Sunny. For me, I read so many stories about Sable being such a headache to work with and this and that. Bro, she wasn't when I was there. I've got to say, man, I never, ever had an issue working with Sable, ever.
Mm-hmm. And Marco said one of
go ahead, TJ. Go ahead.
Well, Marco said one of his favorite wrestlers was was Owen Hart. Mine is Jeff Jarrett, of course, a good friend of yours. Can you tell us a bit about your friendship with Jeff Jarrett?
Yeah, man, me and Jeff go way, way, way back. And bro, I swear to God, Jeff is just, to this day, man, Jeff is such a freaking pro. And that's why I relied heavily on him at WCW for two reasons, man. Number one, he's a great heel. He gets baby faces over. He gets people over all day long. And number two, he never got hurt. He never got hurt, and that's what I needed. I needed a workhorse. I needed a good heel that was going to get baby faces over, and I needed somebody that I knew was, you know, just, you know, not going to get hurt. And I mean, the fact that he's still doing it today, man, that tells you everything you need to know about Jeff, man.
Were you a fan of the cowboy gimmick at first, the country singer gimmick?
Oh, the JEFFJAW. Yeah, I mean, I was a fan of that. It definitely gave him a character, definitely.
Oh yeah, he's so good at his craft, and he didn't do a backflip or whatever, just old school wrestling, and it works.
Solid wrestler, man, knows how to get people over, knows how to bump, knows how to sell. God, bro, it was great.
If you have the pencil today in WWE or AEW, well, basically WWE, who you pushing to the limits, to the moon, and make him a world champion of all people?
I would say,
or
bro,
a top guy.
Yeah, I would say right now, out of that entire roster, the guy I am taking is Drew. Bro, I swear to God, they've labeled Drew with the bulletproof label. And that's not a good label to have. What bulletproof means is the guy is so good that no matter what you do to him, he's going to stay over. No matter how many times you beat him, you're going to put a microphone in his hand and he's going to get over. Bro, you can only do that so many times. Bro, Drew would have been the perfect corporate champion for the way he's been screwed around in that company, for the way they've used him. Bro, you cut Drew's hair, you put him in a suit and tie, you put 2 hot babes on his arms, you've got a hot corporate champion. Because like I tell you, man, they've labeled them bulletproof and they keep beating them and beating them and beating them. And he's so good that he's going to constantly keep himself over. But, bro, you keep going back to that well, it's just a matter of time before he doesn't mean anything. They're kind of doing that to Rhea Ripley a little bit now, if you notice. You know, you've got 2 women, half of Rhea Ripley's size, beating her. Io Sky and Liv Morgan are beating her. And then last night, she gets slapped in the face by somebody half her size and does nothing. Bro, that's how you kill a talent, bro. That's how you kill them. The way to write for anybody, bro, is you gotta stay true to that talent. And what I mean by that is every talent you write for, you got to put yourself in their shoes. What would Austin do if this happened? So if I'm writing that Rhea Ripley scene and Io Sky slapped Rhea Ripley, now as I'm writing, I become Rhea Ripley. Okay, what would I do? The last thing I would do is sit there and do nothing. Bro, that's how you bury talent, man.
I think they got no solid heel for Rhea Ripley right now on the woman's side.
And whose fault is that, bro? They haven't made a solid heel. That's nobody's fault but their own, bro. They haven't made a solid heel.
Agree.
Yeah. Do you have any memories from your time in TNA?
Man, I was at TNA the longest, man. I was at it the longest. And I got to tell you, man, there were 2 different TNAs. And the first TNA was, you know, it was Jeff's company. It was a brand new company. Everybody was working together because everybody loved Jeff and everybody wanted this to work as a second wrestling company. So there was that TNA. And then there was the Bischoff, Hogan, Pritchard TNA, where TNA just turned into another wrestling company. And that's when it got to me. It got to the point of this is not fun. I can't deal with the politics anymore. This is going all the way back to 2012. And that's when I made the decision to leave, man. So there are really two very, very different TNA stories.
Yeah. Who are you the most sad, the most fun writing for in TNA? There's a couple of guys like AJ Styles, maybe guys like that you absolutely love writing stories for.
I love, bro. I swear to God, the guy to me that was the easiest to freaking write for, and I just absolutely love was Kurt Angle, man. I loved writing for Kurt. I loved Kurt as a person. You know, but bro, you know, like I was just watching I guess that Chris Van Vliet just did a long interview with Scott Steiner. Like I loved working with Scott, bro. Scott was so freaking funny. You know, I always love working with Kevin Nash. You know what I mean? You know, so I enjoyed working with a lot of the guys, but you know, when Hogan and Bischoff came in, then she hired Pritchard. We were just right back to the politic bullshit, and that's when I was done.
Yeah, because at the beginning where you're pushing new talent like Joe Styles, Daniels, all that kid and the new style, so that works.
Yep, exactly. It just needed time, bro. It just needed time. But then, you know, Dixie brought them in and that was it, you know?
Yeah.
I have a question about one guy that absolutely loves you like to death, Jim Cornette. Why do you think he hates you so much?
Well, to start, bro, honestly, if you want to be honest, for starters, I'm from New York. Jim is a Southern guy who hates New Yorkers. So let's start right there.
Okay.
Also, bro, you know, twice when our paths crossed, Vince McMahon chose me ahead of Jim Cornette, and Dixie Carter chose me in favor of Jim Cornette. So there were 2 times when we were working together, and then the boss decided to go forward with me and not him. And Jim likes to blame me for that rather than look himself in the mirror and say, why? Why did Vince choose Vince Russo? Why did Dixie choose Vince Russo? Bro, there's a very good reason for that. And the reason for it is Jim was always stuck in his ways. Jim always wanted to do everything, circa 1970 Memphis, and that wasn't working anymore. And, he was very difficult to work with. He was very difficult to see things another way. And at the end of the day, the Vince McMahons and the Dixie Carters didn't want to deal with that. So I was just a lot easier to work with in that aspect. So that's really what it's all about. Like Jim Cornette will tell you, I cost him those jobs. I didn't cost him anything, bro. The boss chose me. That's got no. What am I supposed to do? Underperform so they don't pick me? Is that what I'm supposed to do? The bottom line was, if Jim would have changed his ways a little bit and adjusted a little bit more to the system, maybe things would have been different. But that's the bottom line, because I don't hate Jim Cornette at all. I don't think about Jim Cornette. Jim Cornette doesn't bother me. But to this day, Cornette makes a living out of me being the brunt end of all his jokes. And like, honestly, bro, I literally could give 2 shits about Jim Cornette.
Okay.
And we talked a bit about Vince McMahon a lot before, and everybody has their stories about Vince McMahon. When everything came out, the allegations about the stuff that happened, let's say in the back, were you surprised by that?
Yeah, bro, I was surprised. I was shocked. And bro, I still am hoping it's not true. I don't want to believe that about the guy. Listen, man, him and I had our disagreements. We didn't leave on the best of terms and stuff like that. But I hate to think that's the guy I was working for, man. I really hate to think that. So there is a part of me that still hopes it's not true. And I hate the whole thing, man. I just, like I said, man, all the time I spent with him and all the time I gave him and the commitment I made, and then to realize that this could have been the guy I was giving my life to. That's why I really hope this stuff isn't true. But man, when you've got so many people and so many NDAs, man, it's tough not to believe what you hear.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Do you ever talk to him after your departure in 99?
Yeah, a couple of times, bro. I almost went back in 2002.
Okay.
And then, a couple of years ago, I had an email exchange with him where he got hot at me again. So I just cut it off and never talked to him again. So there's no ill will. I mean, there's none of that, like I said, bro, I hate to think that that's who the guy really was that I was working for. Cause I didn't see any of that.
Okay. Do you still writing stuff today other than wrestling, other stuff that I think you love writing, so maybe you're writing other stuff?
Yeah, bro, I just wrote my 3rd book. I wrote my 3rd book. My 3rd book is called Total Nonstop Agony. And it picks up when Bischoff and Hogan came into TNA. That's where the book picks up. I wrote the first draft. I sent it back to the publisher. I'm waiting for them to get back to me now with the edit. And, I'm hoping that that book comes out this year. It all depends on them. It doesn't, like I said, man, I already wrote the first draft. They got my first draft. I'm waiting on them now. But yeah, man, that's the third book. I always wanted to write a trilogy, and this was like the final chapter.
How many time you spend on writing a book?
God, bro, I put off doing it for years and years and years because it's such a tedious job. Bro, I swear to you, when I sat down and started writing that, I was done in a matter of weeks. It just all came out of me, bro. And there's a lot of stuff in there where I'm not kind to certain people, but I'm not gonna lie, man. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not gonna soft code anything. I'm not gonna cookie code anything. And I was surprised of how the story flowed out of me, man. So I'm really looking forward to getting it back from the publisher, man, because I do want to get this thing out.
Yeah.
And of course, WWF, TNA, WCW. Is there some people that to this day you still talk to from those times?
Just the people I really do podcasts with, bro. I do podcasts with my kind of inner circle is, Stevie Ray from Harlem Heat's a good friend. Stevie Richards, I do shows with. EC3, Disco, Al Snow. So like I got a core group of guys that I still work with like every single week. Outside of that, once in a while I'll DM with people and stuff like that. But I got to be honest with you, man. I really try to keep my distance from wrestling because it's a job to me. I don't enjoy it, man. I don't enjoy watching it. I don't enjoy talking about it. It's a job, and I try to treat it like a job. So, I'm not constantly on the phone with people, and because I just when it comes to today's product, bro, like I don't care. Like I just don't care, and a lot of people like hate me for that. Hey, man, I used to love wrestling. There was a time when I loved wrestling. I don't love wrestling in 2024, and there's got to be a reason for that. I still love baseball. I never stopped loving baseball, but for some reason, I stopped loving wrestling. And that's because wrestling today is much, 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 much different than the wrestling I grew up on and the wrestling I watched. It's totally, totally different.
Yeah. And final question, what would you say is your biggest regret?
Bro, my biggest regret is getting in the wrestling business. and that's a shoot. That's a shoot. If I would have known the things that I knew now, I would have never. Bro, so many people ask me, and I'm not being a dick. So many people say to me, "Oh, Vince, I want to be a writer and I want to write wrestling. And what would you do?" And I can't tell them with a good conscience get in the wrestling business. So I tell them, don't get in the wrestling business. You've got to trust me. It's a political cesspool. It'll take years off your life, and you'll wind up not loving it. I mean, I'm telling you. So if I knew everything I know about the business now, I would have never, ever, ever got in the wrestling business. I'm just being honest.
True. Yep.
And for any young writer, don't email Linda McMahon. She doesn't work here anymore.
Yeah, exactly. and I say this too, bro. Like, my God, man, with streaming and all these platforms, my God, if you are a writer, there are so many opportunities now, man. Content is king. Everybody wants content between network television and streaming and online. Man, if you can write content, you will find work. But you got to understand, man, wrestling is such a close-knit club. Look at who we've got writing wrestling today. Triple H and all his buddies and Tony Khan, because he owns the company. You're not going to get in there if you're a freaking writer. That's not going to happen. The only reason I got in there was because I got hired as a magazine writer, and I kind of went through the system. Nobody's going to get hired today as a wrestling writer unless they're in that inner circle. You're not going to get a job, man. So go after something that's more plausible and that's more reasonable. And like I said, there's so many opportunities out there to be a writer today.
And you talk about some platforms, some streaming. Where can we see and hear Vince Russo these days?
Yeah, guys, I do multiple shows every day with all the people I mentioned, and you can go to russosbrand.com. And if you've never been a Patreon member, bro, you can go to our Patreon right now and get a free week. So you could sample all our shows. Just go to patreon.com/Russo TWC and get your free week of the brand, bro. It'll cost you nothing.
Perfect. Duly noted.
Thank you, so. Thank you. Thank you for coming to the podcast. Appreciate it. So
TJ, I did it, bro. I showed up, TJ. I gave you the full time. I answered all the questions, TJ. Everything you wanted, bro.
Yeah. And then some. So
and then some. Yes. Well, listen, man. It was a pleasure doing the show with both you guys. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the questions.
Perfect.
Thank you guys very, very, very much for having me, man. I really appreciate it.
And take care, Vince.
Thank you, TJ. Thank you, Marco.
Thank you. Et voilà, l'entrevue avec Vince Russo est maintenant dans le rétroviseur. Donc, on a ajouté.
Il y a bien du stock dans le rétroviseur depuis le début du podcast. Hein? Beaucoup d'affaires. On va faire le ménage.
Ouais, on est rendu à quasiment 400. On approche le 400 épisodes cette année. Donc, c'est assez impressionnant. Puis, évidemment, c'est de voir où est-ce qu'on va avec les invités. Plusieurs sphères. Évidemment, la lutte rétro, c'est notre bonbon. C'est ce qu'on voulait couvrir le plus en faisant le podcast. Fait que je pense que nos invités de marque au podcast, ça va dans cette lignée-là. Puis Vince Russo en faisait partie.
Ouais. On peut pas voir ce que l'avenir nous réserve. On n'a aucune idée, mais si des invités comme Vince Russo peuvent continuer d'aller dans nos mains, ben, on va avoir bien du fun. Puis on ne sait pas ce que l'avenir nous réserve. On ne sait pas qui peut avoir éventuellement, mais pour l'instant, là, on a commencé à faire une bonne liste là, du monde qu'on a eu sur le podcast. Puis on est bien content de ça.
Ouais, puis on n'a pas vraiment. On ne s'assied pas genre ensemble puis dire OK, il faut absolument avoir ces gars-là, puis on les chase pas tant que ça. Là.
On est opportuniste pas mal aussi. Hein.
On est opportuniste, puis de temps en temps, on lance une perche ou deux, puis ça fonctionne.
Les bonnes connexions aussi, ça aide beaucoup. Là.
Exact. Donc, non, c'est juste le fun d'aller dans le rétro. Qu'on aime ou qu'on n'aime pas les personnages, je pense que c'est toujours intéressant d'avoir un nom comme ça qui a participé à l'histoire de la lutte. Donc, voilà, c'était notre entrevue avec nul autre que Vince Russo.
Puis pourquoi pas, si vous avez... il en a parlé à la fin du podcast, là, de l'entrevue, comme quoi que première semaine était gratuite, je pense, pour son Patreon. Fait qu'allez voir ça. Pourquoi pas? Vous allez peut-être trouver un autre podcast à écouter, on ne sait pas.
Vous allez peut-être trouver votre compte dans ce podcast-là. Donc, si vous voulez jeter un coup d'œil sur ses réseaux sociaux, donc vincerussobrand.com. Ouais.
Puis il n'en pas ce parti-là, mais on le remercie beaucoup d'avoir été sur le podcast avec nous autres. Pour vrai, il m'a roasté un peu au début, mais pour vrai, il était super gentil, là, très généreux de son temps, puis on a eu bien du fun avec.
In and out cam aussi. Même quand on a arrêté l'enregistrement, il n'a pas fait sa vedette ou un gars qui était plus intéressant qu'un autre. Il a été très...
Puis vous l'avez vu, la petite promo qu'il nous a faite, c'est après qu'on a enregistré le podcast, l'entrevue, on a fait ça avec lui, puis pour vrai, c'était sa coche.
Ouais. Fait que, merci, j'espère que vous avez apprécié. Puis si vous avez des suggestions d'invités qu'on pourrait avoir ou peut-être pas avoir, qu'on peut essayer, ben faites-nous signe, puis si on peut les avoir, tant mieux. Sinon, ben on essaie toujours de donner le meilleur contenu possible.
Ouais. Avant de nous quitter, on va parler du reste du mois pour le podcast de Marco. On commence ça avec une autre biographie.
Biographie de Lita, une des femmes pionnières qui a révolutionné la lutte féminine, a été une des qui a aidé à lancer vraiment, capitaliser, à propulser la lutte féminine à un autre niveau, évidemment avec son style athlétique, son style extrême. Donc Lita, la biographie du mois d'avril au podcast. Et, oh là là, là, on a des bangers par-dessus bangers par-dessus bangers. WrestleMania X7 Rock Austin, les nostalgiques et ceux qui suivent la lutte depuis longtemps vont se rappeler surtout du recap vidéo avec Limp Bizkit entre The Rock et Steve Austin. Évidemment, un très, très gros show qu'on avait fait.
Aux yeux de plusieurs, c'est pas mal le meilleur WrestleMania de l'histoire pour beaucoup de monde.
Ouais, c'est débattable. On en reparlera quand on fera le podcast, peut-être. Puis on l'avait déjà enregistré dans nos débuts avant qu'on se mette un peu à nu devant tout le monde. Ben, pas littéralement, là, mais.
Pas monsieur à nu.
Non, monsieur à nu, on comprend, oui.
Je comprends, oui.
Mais on l'avait enregistré back in the time, peut-être il y a 5 ans. Puis on l'avait.
Au début.
Au début. Fait qu'on l'a refait version plus moderne. Fait que. Et voilà. WrestleMania X7 et c'est pas le seul.
Non.
L'année d'après, WrestleMania X8, évidemment, avec Rock Hogan, la confrontation, le double turn, on peut dire ça comme ça. NWO Hogan contre The Rock dans un autre très très bon show qui est dans les top WrestleMania of all time selon moi aussi.
Ouais, pour vrai, X7, X8, là, c'est vraiment un très bon, mettons, comment je pourrais dire ça? Pas une suite, là, mais pour un back-to-back, c'est très fort.
Puis si ma mémoire est bonne, puis je sais qu'elle n'est pas bonne, là, mais il me semble que le 19 n'était pas mauvais non plus.
19, 20 était bon. 21 était bon. 22,
après,
je me rappelle.
un peu plus,
22, je me rappelle pas trop, mais il me semble que c'était pas écœurant. Là. Mais pour
après
vrai,
ça se gâche un peu.
X7, X8, 19, 20, 21, c'était vraiment une très bonne période de la WWE.
Exact. Donc, c'est ça.
Et bien sûr, toujours important de rappeler ça à tout le podcast qu'on fait.
Ouais. À travers la table, le mardi, live, 20h30, Facebook, Twitch, YouTube, entrevue, lutte québécoise, lutte moderne et plein de niaiseries. On est live.
Des jeux, on a commencé à faire Géopardy, fait qu'on va en faire d'autres, c'est le fun.
Ouais, Géopardy, on a des posters qui s'en viennent aussi, ça va être intéressant. On va essayer de devenir des posters.
Je savais pas, c'est parfait.
Ouais, là, tu le sais.
Parfait, c'est bon.
Yes.
Fait que Marco, évidemment, merci d'avoir été là avec Vince Russo pour la belle entrevue. On a bien du fun à le faire, fait que j'espère que ça va paraître quand vous allez l'écouter.
Plaisir, bro.
Yes, sir, bro. Fait qu'on se voit pour la semaine prochaine pour l'autre podcast, bro. À travers la table et en de métal, évidemment. Mais n'oubliez pas, surtout, mesdames et messieurs, c'est très important. J'ai dit à toi le podcast parce que c'est important de le rappeler. N'oubliez pas. On y va!